So this is maybe a ship that is not featured very often anymore, especially since the nerfs to its acceleration. That was one of the specialties of the Henri. So now it has to play a little bit differently, a little bit more passive. You used to be able to just easily dodge most salvos at 15 kilometers, sometimes even closer depending on who you were playing against. But this Henri game is special because I get a ton of damage, and honestly, games like that don't happen too much anymore, so I'm pretty happy with this result. I just wanted to talk about this specific build. You're going to notice that, yes, that green line on the minimap is my concealment. It's around 18 kilometers, so not very good at all. So oftentimes you're going to want to use islands to push up with, and especially like you just saw me do, you want to turn around, using the island to block any shells, any line of sight, that kind of thing. Even if somebody had shot me when I turned out there, it would have just hit the island and we would have been completely safe. That's a really, really good strategy to use. Of course, we're angled away. You're going to see that all the time in random battles. It just makes it so much easier to disengage and not get yourself stuck in a situation where you're just going to die to something over time. We don't really know what's all on this flank yet. I spawned, well, essentially alone with this Republic, so we don't really know what the enemy team has here. Henri, of course, is a ship that you do get hit pretty hard with. Stuff like that is something you used to be able to dodge very easily just by stopping and starting. And it's less easy now. But what we have instead is an incredible amount of gunpowder. That's actually something they didn't touch at all, and was one of the biggest strengths of the Henri, was its just insane ability to pump out damage on people. Reload boost, of course, is amazing, and something that goes a little bit underappreciated, I would say, is the AP. So seeing a broadside Salem is a great opportunity to show it off, and of course we get 9 overpens to start with. But having this reload boost, yeah, it does a ton of damage in a hurry. You'll often want to save this reload booster for times when you've pumped the damage control on someone to relight another permanent fire, sticky fire, that kind of thing. But the most satisfying by far is using it against broadside cruisers, because this AP is no joke as we hit them for another 20k. The alpha is nearly Moskva levels, I believe. Maybe it's a little bit... It's somewhere in that Moskva-Hindenburg level. But the reason I bring up Moskva specifically is actually the pen is about the same as Moskva. So it's not the Petro levels of insanity like we get these days, but back when this ship came out, it had some of the best AP for a cruiser at all. And because of the build I'm running, we can actually get our reload down to a pretty insane 8-ish seconds, 8.5 seconds. Henri, of course, in its base form, has a well over 10-second reload. And that's because of the Legendary mod. So we're not focused on Concealment at all. The Legendary mod makes you have faster reload, more range at the cost of Concealment. It takes up the Concealment slot, but not only that, it adds Concealment to your ship. So, or it reduces the Concealment of your ship just on the module itself. So you're not going to be sneaking up on anybody with this build. Also, the shell velocity is kind of slow, and something that I'm not all that used to because I don't play this ship all the time. But it's a really interesting thing to play nowadays just because things kind of just play at max range anyway. So this horrible Concealment isn't the end of the world just because people are oftentimes so far back that it doesn't really matter all that much anymore. And because this Legendary mod unique upgrade is in the Concealment slot, the 5th slot, you can still run reload, and that's how we're getting this insane reload on the Henri. Something you could do if you wanted to is actually take IFHE on this ship, and that would give you the ability to pen 50 millimeters of armor. And that's why this ship was so popular back in the days of COTS 7, COTS 8, COTS 9 kind of time, to deal with the Stalingrads, the Balian, Stalingrad, Moskva type ships that would just sit on islands. This was a ship you could take to somewhat counter that. I just can, every time I see this ship, I think back to Kings of the Sea 8 and missing over and over and over again as a battleship player trying to kill these things at long range. The acceleration nerf is incredibly dramatic. It is a huge, huge nerf to the survivability of the ship at closer ranges. It can still do all right at longer ranges, and if you predict where a battleship's going to shoot, but it's nowhere near what it used to be. Get serious flashbacks every time I run into one of these things in random battles. But that doesn't mean it's a bad ship. I think Henri gets the reputation of being kind of just a weak cruiser nowadays, and I don't agree with that at all. Its damage output is easily one of the best at tier 10. Not necessarily for the DPM, and not necessarily for its shell arcs or its crazy AP like Petro, but just that sustained damage output that this ship can do over long distances, long periods of time, and of course the reload booster that can really help you stack dots or give you that insane AP burst like we showed on that Salem. This thing's a really, really good ship if you're going for high damage numbers. A lot of people that I know, some friends in this game, actually call this the John Henry from John Deere Labs. That's kind of the nickname this ship got just because it farmed damage so well. And for good reason, honestly. Some of the damage numbers that I've seen some of my friends come up with is absolutely insane with this ship. It's not a playstyle that I've played all that much, so I'm not quite at that level yet, but this game was pretty good. And honestly, getting over 100k damage in the first 4 minutes of this match, if you didn't catch that, that's what happened at the very beginning. It helped that Salem went broadside onto us, but the damage output is no joke. We're already up to 155k, which honestly is a good game already, and there's just so much of the game left to play. That's the nice thing about standard battles, is a lot of the times the matches go long. It's unlikely that you're going to get a very fast, quick game, just because each team generally retains control of their cap for a really long time. Domination games can go quick just because a few DDs die, the enemy team gets all the caps, they tick very quickly, and then you just kind of lose outright because of that. Epicenter, much the same way, except the center cap especially ticks so fast. It's like 10 or 15 points every couple seconds. It's ridiculous. But standard battles are perfect for these long, drawn-out farming type games. And you'll notice that I've been playing this Henri a little bit aggressively. I've kind of led some pushes, getting up into these islands, and that's because I'm confident, well, that this Yamato doesn't have a ton of support. And the other thing is, I'm confident that I can use these islands to limit who's shooting at me and take, well, fights that I'm in an advantage state, let's say. This Yamato, of course, has a lot to deal with here. He just shot at the Republic, so I know he's not loaded at the moment. And testing out the AP, we don't quite have the pen to Citadel him at those ranges, but that's okay. Upper belt is going to get us some great damage as well. And we used our reload booster again there. It's such a great tool to get damage in when somebody's trying to get behind cover as well. It's actually really handy. It's something that the Henri didn't come with. If you played back in the day when the ship launched, it didn't have a reload booster at all. It just had its normal damage output, and that was it. But they found people weren't really playing this ship all that much, and the line itself wasn't getting played a ton, so for most of the lower tier ships, I believe they nerfed the reloads and then added this reload booster. Whereas Henri, I'm not 100% sure on this. I believe it retained its damage output and they just added a reload booster. That could be wrong. That could be wrong, and they adjusted when they added the reload booster. But I'm glad they did. The reload boosters are so much fun to use. For those of you that saw or maybe even tested out the PTS currently with the French tier 11 cruiser, we're calling that one the Henri 5, also from John Deere Labs, because that one's also amazing at farming. And that one gets the autoloader and the reload booster, so some pretty insane amounts of damage output from these ships. And I think that's very unique and very interesting and a lot of fun to play with. Not all the time, because a big ship like this with horrible concealment isn't going to work all of the time. It's not going to be this jack-of-all-trades ship like the Hindenburg is, for example, where you're just kind of good in most scenarios. There's a lot of times where the Henri just gets pushed out, isn't able to impact the game with its damage output. That's really how you win games in a Henri, is just your raw damage output. You don't have that radar. You don't really have the tankiness to hold a flank. You're just there to kite and cause damage to anybody who wants to push in. And in this case, we ourselves are pushing in. Something I did have to consider a lot in this match was, when do I go back and help our main cap? Standard battles generally result in one team pushing one flank and the other one pushing the other side. And if you're on the flank where your team is pushing, sometimes the correct play is to abandon that push and go back and try and defend. In this case, that was not what we did, just because we had 2 DDs alive, and that really forced the enemy team to leave their push or abandon their push and try and come back and defend. So it was important that we push and get control of these islands. The way this map works is, well, eventually, as you can see 15 minutes or so into this match, we get control of the entire 1, 2, 3, 4 lines, and then we can use these islands to mount a push or hold next to their cap or our cap. Very easy, but it results in a lot of boring, difficult, long-range spam at the beginning, so I don't really enjoy this map all that much. Henri, of course, has 240mm guns, and that means you can overmatch Colberts, you can overmatch Smolensks, you can overmatch Minotaurs. That's something the Moskva actually can't do. So a nice little bonus there just for having these big, giant guns. Even though the shell arcs aren't as good, at least you have the pen and even better overmatch than something like a Moskva. We've now used, well, a lot of that extra HP we had. We only have 1 heal left, so it's time to make use of islands. We can't just do the open water fighting thing like we've been doing a lot of this match. We can't just go straight up toe-to-toe with people. So it's time to use islands, and Henri is pretty good around islands. Assuming you have your speed boost up, you can maneuver relatively quickly in and out of cover and get a lot of damage out. And something that really is nice, not necessarily on this map, but on other maps, is these floaty shells allow you to go over a lot of islands, much like a Des Moines or a Worcester or Colbert, that are really, really good at making use of island cover due to that floaty arc. Henri is the same. Something like a Moskva or a Petro, Nevsky can't make use of islands nearly as much just because of their arcs. They can't get the shells over. So it is a bit of a downside a lot of the time, but once you get used to the arcs, this HE hits really, really hard. We are using heavy HE in this one. We'll go over the build at the end. It is almost the full farmer's build. Some of my friends actually run no concealment at all, resulting in 20.9 kilometer detection. It's actually more than your max gun range. And the reason for that is actually something you can see in the bottom middle of the screen. That's one of the new commander skills from 10.0. It gives you a reload boost to your main guns, assuming an enemy ship is spotted within your detection range. So that Republic is spotted within the detection range, we're getting an 8% boost to our reload. Very nice to have. 252k, and we finally get our first kill. Obviously, I haven't really been hunting for kills here, just kind of trying to farm as much damage as possible. Swapping to the AP because Zhao can take some huge damage from the AP if he gives us broadside. Zhaos are known to have some trollish armor, so we might get a lot of overpens as well. Of course, Henri, AP can be good, but that massive pen that they have does result in a lot of overpens, and no improved pen angles means you're going to bounce a lot of the time as well. We're going to use another one of our reload boosters just to get that little bit of extra damage out on this Zhao if he turns broadside, for example. We want to try and keep our DDs alive as much as possible because this is coming down to the wire. We are in an advantage, we should win this, but it's not guaranteed yet. So getting that reload boost allows us to get 1 or 2 extra salvos in, which is really, really nice. Henri is a great ship still. I don't think it's for everyone, honestly, and there's a lot of other ships that you should probably be getting before this one. It's a very niche, specialized playstyle. It's pretty hard to play too. A lot of the really good Henri players that I know talk about it being really strong, really strong in a good player's hands, but kind of weak as if you're not used to playing cruisers, right? This large concealment, and well, look at how big the ship is too. It's very big and quite easy to hit these days. Makes it a very difficult one to play. But in the right hands, it does a ton of damage. You're going to see that on this Zhao as he just angles smartly to our AP. We will want to swap to the HE. With heavy HE, this HE hits just as hard, if not harder, than Zhao Japanese HE does, and that's kind of been their gimmick. So Henri getting that a massive amount of HE damage so quickly is very nice to have indeed. That was 7,000 damage with one single salvo and a fire, and it just keeps coming. 5,000, and assuming we had our reload boost available, we got like a 4-second reload with that much HE pressure. Pretty insane. We're going to swap to the AP here. Something you're going to notice, maybe you have picked up on it already, maybe you haven't, but I actually intended to have Expert Loader, but I actually don't have it in this one. So we're getting the slower reloads on this one, but you can use your reload booster to get that. And we do pick up the Zao with 14 overpens. There's that troll armor that we're so used to out of the Zao. Sometimes you get nuked, sometimes you just take overpens in the Zao. It's kind of a random RNG-filled experience when you're playing the Zao and when you're fighting one. Sometimes you're going to one-shot it, and other times it's just going to live. And that's okay. We've already got up to 308,000 damage out of this Henri game. And honestly, for someone who doesn't play Henri all that much, I'm pretty happy with this one, the way it turned out. I see a few mistakes that I made, some of the pushes I made, some of the positioning errors that I've made so far, like, for example, getting caught by that Colbert earlier on, could have been played better, but as you play the ship more, you'll know and understand its limits as you go along. I think it's a great ship if you're looking to just get damage out of games. And the way things are, with how passive things are, maybe it's a better option than some of the closer range damage farm ships, maybe like a Smolensk or Colbert, for example, where they're pretty limited on range and shell velocity. They're going to be struggling in the future. Assuming submarines get added, it's going to be difficult to play those ships because nobody's going to want to push into them. Henri at least does have that range. And we end up with, what, 315,000 damage in this one. 2 kills? Not bad at all, including Confederate and high caliber. And of course a Witherer. You're going to get a ton of those if you're playing a Henri against any sort of battleships. That was, I think, my second highest damage Henri game. And I was pretty happy at the end of this one, I'm not going to lie. I'm pretty happy about this result here. And you can see just how much damage per shell hit we're getting too. 312 hits for 317,000 damage. It's pretty good. And 3.4k base. The next closest was 1,500 base XP below us. A pretty insane match, and you can see where the majority of our damage came from. That Yamato gifting us 100,000 damage, and a Salem giving us 70. Now, as far as the build that you were looking at here, it's a weird one, but we are looking for as much damage as possible, and that does involve raising our max concealment. We're trying to get detected as soon as possible to take advantage of top grade gunner. That is 8% reload for free pretty much with this ship. Heavy HE of course helps us do that with its 15% debuff to concealment, as well as giving us extra damage out of our HE. Adrenaline Rush of course, just an amazing skill for damage output, and Superintendent gives us those 5 reload boosters, and probably it's just so important to make use of all of these consumables. Defensive fire is pretty useful against the aircraft carriers. The AA on Henri is not bad at all, only when you have the defensive fire up though. You could run Hydro if you wanted to, but the way I see it, you're usually not pushing into torps in this one. But, you know, sometimes it does happen, so it's up to you. I do run 1 concealment. This is something that the diehard or the true farmers of this ship wouldn't be running. They would probably run Survivability Expert along with Gunfeeder and Consumable Specialist to get into those reload boosters a little bit faster. And of course, if you don't take Concealment, that means your Concealment goes up by a lot. And that means you're going to always have that 8% boost. If you're able to shoot your guns and you don't take Concealment, you will have 8% reload buff on basically every shot you take, which is pretty hilarious. Eventually, the last 1 point skill will be Gunfeeder. You'll notice I did prioritize Grease the Gears. I do think that's right over Gunfeeder, just because of how slow these turrets turn. It's still 32.7 seconds on a cruiser, which is not the most comfortable thing in the world. Especially if you're kiting, running away, swapping sides a lot, it's a little bit tricky. And of course, here we go. The 2 reload buffs here, main battery mod and the unique upgrade, right? 8% range and another 12% reload. So pretty nuts level of reloadability. But again, we get 10% worse concealment. And of course, we lose the 10% from Concealment. So it's around a 20% hit to our Concealment just from this one slot alone. Pretty crazy, right? And that acceleration you saw that game was with propulsion mod. So just imagine without propulsion mod what this thing would feel like. Back in the day, you used to be able to run both the steering gears here and the propulsion mod here. And so that was just because the unique upgrade wasn't a thing, and you could just dodge everyone. A lot of my friends that I've seen in this game back in the day were just dodging 4, 5, 6 ships, shooting them all at once, just with how maneuverable this thing was. It is crazy. And it's not that anymore, but the gun power is just as incredible. So if you're able to maneuver around the weakness of the ship, which is, of course, its horrible concealment and bad maneuverability, large size, meaning you're going to get hit a lot, it's a really good damage farmer and a lot of fun when you run into a lot of battleships. So thank you very much for watching this one. I had a lot of fun playing this game, and I hope you enjoyed watching this one. Not as much of a topical one, just a fun game I had. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.